All right, now we're going to talk about the fail last position double acting actuator. The pressure supply source is very similar to the one we showed previously. You have your inlet particulate filter. You have your regulator for cutting line pressure down to approximately 100 psi. As time goes forward, you can move that up to approximately 140 psi in increments as you see fit. You have a pressure gauge to show you what the pressure is going to the actuator, and on the back side of that you have a relief valve. In the event that the regulator were to fail, you would not send line pressure to the actuator. Downstream of the regulator, we have a coalescing filter to pick up any liquids that might be condensed, taking high pressure cut, thus coalescing any liquids. This is a coalescing filter, would remove those. It then comes to a four-way solenoid with coils on each side. One coil for opening, one coil for closing. When approximately 3 to 5 seconds of power is applied to each one, it will push the spool in the solenoid to where air goes to the opposite side of the cylinder, and the valve will then turn. We've activated the closing coil, and not sure if you can see that, but the indicator has shown that the valve has gone to the closed. So we now know that this coil is the one that closes the valve. This would be the opening. However, if for some reason you don't have power, you do have manual overrides on the solenoid also. You can push the manual override and operate it to the open position. Still not having power, you simply go to the manual override on the other side. And the valve is now back in the closed position. All right, at this point, we're showing you down inside of the actuator, down through what's referred to as the yoke. You'll see the keyway here. All actuators shipped for fail last position are shipped for this to be mounted when the valve is in the open position. If for some reason the valve is in the closed position, then the actuator needs to be rotated so that it turns properly for the valve to go back to the open position. Okay, now what we've done is we've set the stem adapter up here so that you can see the bottom side here would be attached to the top of the valve stem. And this is the part that fits up inside of the actuator. You'll notice that there are 4 keyways cut on this. This is so that the actuator can be mounted in this direction, this direction, this direction, or this direction, or 3, 6, 9, and 12 o'clock positions. This would be lined up to where the key. It's our recommendation that the switch mechanism is moved, such as is done here. This is installed on top of the valve stem, and then the actuator is lowered down to the stem adapter. And once it's lined up, you drop the key down into these 2 points, thus making the whole setup of installation much easier. Okay, the next step, once the actuator is mounted, would be to place the switch mechanism back on top. you'll notice that there is a flat bar with a recess for the roll pin. This is lined up, pushed in, and typically tapping down brings the unit back to the position. At this point, Adam, if we can activate that solenoid. Hopefully you can see that the switch mechanism, the local indicator moved, and at this point you can set the switches on the inside as we described in the other operation previously. Okay, now we're going to talk about the manual override portion, the hydraulic portion. These are hydraulic fluids that move the actuator. The first step is to depressurize the system to make sure that you're not fighting against supply pressure. You'll notice a rather unique vent. The one when we got it back from you guys had the plug in here, but it didn't have, on shipment, you get a hooded stainless steel or silver looking vent. The plug should be removed and the vent installed so that the hydraulics can breathe during operation. The next thing you'll notice is the indicator. This is 3 position on a fail last position. The center being automatic. That's when the solenoid or the manual overrides on the solenoid is operating the valve during the pressurized or supply gas pressure point. To the left is counterclockwise for closing the valve, and to the left is clockwise for opening the valve. I'm going to turn the unit to the clockwise position. The valve is currently showing closed, and I begin to pump. And as you will notice by the indicator, the valve is being opened. Attached to a valve, it's certainly going to be a little more difficult than this, but still manageable. The valve has gone to the open position. You could now put a padlock in here, and as long as this indicator, as long as these hydraulics are locked, this valve will not move. Therefore, if it's in a critical place that the valve needs to stay open or closed, once in that position hydraulically, put a padlock in through the indicator point. To return the valve, you simply move back to the center and then over to the CC, and you would begin to pump the valve back to the closed or open, whichever is the proper point location. Any questions in regards to that, you can ask. That concludes the fail last position operation. Okay, we're going to answer a couple of questions that came up in regards to the fail last position pneumatic actuator. First of all, again, here are the stops for this actuator. Once you've installed the actuator, you can make minor adjustments to make sure that the valve is closing off 100%. As far as the coils on the solenoid, one question that came up, It only takes approximately 3 to 5 seconds of power, 24 volts in your case, to energize this coil, thus moving the spool in the solenoid. The one thing you have to make sure of is on a double-acting dual coil unit that once that power has been applied and the spool and the unit has moved, power has to be removed from this coil for this coil to be energized to move it back. If power is left on this one and you try to energize here, the solenoid will not move, and you will also, over long term, burn out the coil. So if you're doing this from the rock where you can't do momentary 3 to 5 seconds of power, make sure you power it on, and then a few seconds later you power off the coil once you have full knowledge that the valve has traveled where it needs to. Do not leave power on these coils.